Okay, now in the third stage, we are now moving into the acceptance stage, ruled by the element water, which is teaching us how to heal our emotional body. So our emotional body is our pain and our pleasure and our feeling experiences of reality. This is really learning how to see ourselves from the perspective of our higher self. So it's on the pentagram stage. First we have our down to our fire element, from here to here. Then we have our air element from here to here. Now the mental body is looking across to its own reflection and recognizing that not only is it responsible for its creation of reality, but it is also responsible for its creation of the people in its reality. So this is a humbling stage. It's not the stage of humility yet, but it's a humbling stage. It's a process of self-acceptance, self-forgiveness, and compassion for self and others. This is the word that was going to come out of my mouth is vicious stage. It was vicious for me. I was very prideful. I had a lot of pain. I had a lot of anger and sadness toward people in my life. And this stage was it was very challenging. When I went to Peru the first time and started to experience the miracle of letting go, the feeling I was getting in my body by letting go of my past pain, when I started to experience that, I really felt the miracles of what it feels like to really let go of that emotional pain. And interestingly enough, during our shamanic ayahuasca ceremonies, we're drinking water so that the water can flush out the pain from the emotional body, right? Because it's associated with the emotional, or with the element water. In the shamanic warrior, Aniel is trained by the medicine healer. The medicine healer is, again, an archetype of ourselves, an archetype of our being. And in the Hebrew systems, it's Archangel Gabriel, who's the messenger, or connected to our intuition or our higher self or our expression or our authenticity. The medicine healer teaches us to be who we really are. My mentor said, this Ricky Goodall's enough. This Ricky Goodall's enough. You don't need to be some other Ricky Goodall. This Ricky Goodall is enough. The true Ricky Goodall is enough. You don't have to be somebody else. This stage is about accepting ourselves for who we really are and accepting ourselves for who we've been so that we can become who we are meant to be, who we truly are. This stage is challenging. It's full of triggers. It's full of emotional outbursts. It's full of, in my case, uprooting all of my childhood traumas. Traumas I didn't even know were there. Sexual abuse, near-death experiences, and so much more. I didn't even know those traumas were there. They came up during this stage for me. In the Shamanic Warrior, the Greatest Secret series, Aniel is trained by the medicine healer and learns that pain unexpressed becomes repressed and leaves us depressed. So when we don't express our pain, we end up repressing it, and then it becomes depression over time. We end up becoming depressed as a result of that. He learns that pain entities lock in our belief systems. Remember, I told you that earlier. The pain entities, the pain gets stuck in the emotional body and locks its own equivalent in the mental body in the form of belief systems. In this stage, what we're really trying to do is purge. We're trying to purge. We're purging all of our pain out. We're learning how to purge our pain. Now, not all of our pain is necessarily going to come out in this stage. I'm still working through purging some pain myself, but I know how to purge it now. Now I'm skilled in purging my pain. I know how to get it out. When I'm feeling anxious, I know it's not just anxiety. It's a sign that there's some kind of pain is being triggered that I can heal now. So when most people get anxious, they have to deal with their anxiety. When I get anxious, I go into a bedroom, I go into my temple, into my room that I have set up for this work, and I heal it. And then the anxiety never comes back again. So what we're doing in this stage is we're really learning how to heal our emotional body. In this stage, we express our mental illness, we express our emotional pain, we express our guilt, our shame, our regret, our anger, our sadness. One of the ways that I started this process for myself is I recorded a video on Facebook, 25 things I'm scared of you finding out about me. And some of you watching this might remember that video. That video, in that video, I talked about my drug use and my verbal abuse of my relationships. I talked about some of the crimes I've been a part of, some of the, cheating on girlfriends, having affairs with married people, all of these different things. I had to share it all in this video to express it out there and to let it go. When we confess our sins, we forgive ourselves. We're not confessing them to get forgiveness from above. We're confessing them to get forgiveness from below. We're confessing them to get forgiveness from ourselves, because as soon as we say them out loud to another human being, it doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't have to be a priest. It can be a counselor. It could be me. It could be anyone else. As soon as we say it to another human being, we start to release the pressure off of it and it starts to heal. Confession or expression is the key to healing. We are 73% water, or whatever that number, 73, 75, 72.5, whatever. We're 73% water. So this stage is really the majority of our work. The majority of our work is healing, purging, processing, and forgiving our past pain. I've reached a point in my life where I've reached such deep levels of healing in my ceremonies where I can actually see all the way back to my time I was born, why, before I was born, I created all of this stuff that was going to happen to me so that I could learn this system and share it with other people. Now I live I live a blissful life a lot of the times. Any real drama that comes to me is healed very quickly. I know how to heal any struggles now. I'm self-sufficient in my healing. I feel capable to create the life that I want. It was totally worth it. I'd go through it all again, I swear. And you might be thinking, I can't say that about my life. I wouldn't have said that before. Believe me, it took me a long time to get to this point. Not a long time, but it took me a lot of effort. Compared to what, right? I don't know. Maybe this is the only life there ever is. Maybe it's just my life. Maybe you're not even real either, right? This stage can be the longest. It can be the most intense. What we're really doing is purging our emotional waters. We're cleansing our emotional waters. So when you have a glass of water that is filled up with this much water, if the water's murky and dirty, you can't see through it. So in other words, people can't see the real you over here, the real you. And you can't see the real world and all the love that's there for you when the water's murky. When we clean the water, well, you know what happens. When we clean the water, we can see through it and see the real world, and the real world can see the real us. When I say real world, I mean the world of love, happiness, bliss, freedom, fulfillment, and total responsibility. Because listen, if we're going to be totally powerful to the point where we can create miraculous healing and do all of this other kind of stuff, if we're going to reach that level of growth, then we have to take total responsibility for our lives from the time we were born till now. Sometimes I ask people, do you believe that you create your reality? They say, yeah, of course I do. I say, okay, well, when did that start? I think I was 25 and I watched the movie The Secret, and I was like, no. Maybe that's when you consciously started creating your life, or a lot of it. But when did you start creating your life? Oh, when I was born? Yeah, exactly. Right? We started creating it when we were born, and that might sound like a heavy thing for you to receive at this point in your journey. How the hell did I create the fucking torturous pain that I experienced in my childhood? And I only know my own perspective and the torturous pain that I created in my childhood. But we reach a level of healing where we can actually say things like, I get it, I know why I created it now. Because the happiness that I experience now as a result of that, and the courage I have, and the compassion I'm able to have for myself and others, and the experiences I'm able to have in my life, I wouldn't have been able to have without those experiences in my past. And so I'm grateful for them now. I said earlier I'd go through them again. I don't know if that's true, man. Would I really? Maybe. I don't know if I would, but I can say that now because what I have, it's totally worth it. And if I knew as a child what I was going to have as an adult, having gone through that stuff, I don't remember being that scary, if I'm honest. A lot of it I don't even remember until recently, or I didn't remember until recently. A lot of it was scary, but it didn't feel that scary or that painful in the moment because I didn't know anything else. I didn't know anything different than that. Now I do. So I know that the depth of my pain, and I'm sure that you can say the same thing about yourself. Where am I here? So the alchemists say that tears or crying is the decrystallization of hardened emotions. I have cried hundreds of times in the last few years. Literally hundreds of times. I'm not kidding. Hundreds of times. Crying and crying and crying and crying and purging and purging and purging and so much more, screaming in some cases. The esoteric side of this work is way more intense than what I'm telling you in these videos. There's shit that I've seen in ceremonies that will scare some people, but it's part of this healing journey. It's part of one of the ways that we can heal ourselves, but some of it's intense. In this stage, we're healing the roots of our patterns of things like lying, things like cheating, things like stealing or people-pleasing, validation-seeking, living inauthentically, overachieving, overworking, underachieving, perfectionism, whatever. This is the roots of all those problems. This stage is about the roots of all of our behavior that we don't like about ourselves. In this stage, we're finding the emotions associated with all of the behavior we don't like about ourselves, and we're purging it out of our body so that the pain entities leave, and therefore we can find the beliefs now and release them and re-heal them and reprogram them. It's an intense process. Again, very intense. I say that from my own perspective. It might not be intense for you. Some of the ways that purging can happen is through writing. We can write our feelings. We can write letters to ourselves, write letters to our parents or the people that we want to express ourselves to. This is fucking powerful, especially if you read it out loud and burn it afterwards. This can be magic in itself. I promise you, I've done it with lots of people. I have specific rituals, forgiveness rituals and things like this, that if you sign up for the initiation, you'll get all of this kind of stuff. It can look like painting. You paint your feelings. It can look like crying, like I said a minute ago. It can look like laughing. It can look like vomiting. It can look like yelling, singing, chanting, musical rhythm, drumming or beating or rhythms or whatever. It can look like dancing, really, really intense dancing. It can look like really intense singing. It can look like random chanting. It can look like moving your body around in all kinds of funny ways. It can look like trauma release exercises. It can look like any kind of way that moves the energy out of your body. That's what you're trying to do here. You're trying to cleanse and purify your body. Drinking tons of water during this stage, and really all the time in life, is valuable. Drinking 3 or 4 liters of water a day, every single day, is so important and so valuable to our transformation. Might sound like a lot. People say, I pee too much. Your bladder will get stronger over time. People say, I don't have a hard time drinking that much. Drink two glasses of water as soon as you get out of bed, and you'll start the process. Your kidney will start flushing. It'll be easy after that. It'll become a habit very quickly. This can be a very, 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 very uncomfortable stage, very painful stage. This is the first feminine stage in our series. So we have a masculine stage, we have a masculine stage, now we've got the water stage. Now water, on a higher level in the tree of life, represents the Great Mother. Right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah, okay. Right here is the Great Mother in the tree of life. She represents the element water. She's Bina, or the archetype of understanding or receptivity or accepting ourselves and recognizing that the person that we're pointing at is really ourselves, that we are the ones that have created our suffering, usually through our confusion, usually through beliefs that we don't understand. Like, this stuff is going to be challenging to understand if you haven't experienced any kind of like transformation work before. If you haven't done any work where you've actually healed this stuff and saw how it can change you, then you wouldn't possibly know. But let me give you an example. I was working with these two guys, and I know they wouldn't mind me sharing the story. I won't give you any specific details. These two guys had a tragedy happen when they were kids. A parent committed suicide at a very young age. When they came to see me, we were doing a ceremony together. They hated their parent that committed suicide. They hated this parent. They hated. And throughout our work, what I had them do after we experienced the DMT ceremony, a very deep plant medicine ceremony, I had them both sit there and look at me as if I was their father and tell me everything they wanted their father to hear. Everything that their father never said, that they never got to say to their father before he committed suicide. And one of them wouldn't do it. The other one started doing it. And then the other one kind of joined in a little bit. And by the end of it, they were no longer saying terrible things to their father. They were saying how much they loved him and how much they forgave him and how much they hoped that everything's okay. When we express the pain out of our body, our relationships to people begin to transform miraculously. Like, listen, it can be this easy. Go out into the woods and start fucking screaming to all the people who have ever hurt you. Go in your car and start screaming to all the people that have ever hurt you. Recognize that they are hurt people too, and that they have been hurt in their childhood, in their past, which came from their parents, which came from their grandparents, which came from their great-grandparents, all the way up the line to some random trauma probably in history, or some process of how consciousness goes through that cycle, or some tragedy that happened that was out of their control. You recognize there's nobody to blame except God, who is you, so the only person to blame or thing to blame is ourselves, unfortunately, but that's the truth of this kind of wisdom. You don't have to believe it, but that's what I believe. All unprocessed pain must be released in this stage. All relationships have to be worked toward healing in this stage in order to move forward. All mistakes have to be forgiven. And so we learn how to forgive our relationships. We learn how to heal relationships. We learn how to heal our mistakes. We learn how to forgive our past. We learn how to forgive the things we've been through. And then we've now learned how to heal our emotional body. So we can continue that work because, again, once the completion of this stage, of each stage, is really when we become incredibly fluent and skilled at healing that particular elemental body. So once you know, you're pretty confident that you can generate courage when you need to, you can take action when you need to, you can face your fears when you need to, you can beat procrastination and create momentum when you need to, then you can focus on your fears and you can face your suffering and you can face the truth, well then you've learned how to heal your spiritual body, you move on to the air element. You get to the air element, you learn how to heal your mental body, you learn how we create our reality based on our thoughts and our words and our beliefs, you learn how to change your language, you learn how to reprogram your mind a bit, you learn how to heal your emotional body, you learn how to do these types of things, then you've learned that skill. Now you move on to the water stage, the acceptance stage. This is kind of like where we're actually taking fire, which is not really manifested, it's just energy, we're taking air, which is just gas, and now we're creating it into something a little bit more solid. So this is where you actually start doing the work. In the fire stage, in the air stage, you're learning how to do the work. In the water stage, you're starting to actually do the work. You're starting to actually heal the pain. You're starting to actually heal the relationships. You're starting to forgive your mistakes, and you're starting to let go of the past and purge it out of you. Confession is vital to this process. It doesn't matter who it's to, whether it's a therapist or a counselor or a coach or some other human being, but it has to be somebody. It's valuable confessing to God or confessing to your higher self or screaming at your mom or your dad in your car. That's valuable, but there still has to be someone you confess your crap to because it won't go away. Not your crap, but your pain and stuff, right? Like this stuff has to come out. As we heal, our true authentic self starts to shine through. Again, if you've known me for a while, you probably have seen some transitions that I've been going through. I'm not done yet, but this is the direction. It's the direction toward our most authentic self. The person we really are, not the person we pretend to be so we can get people to love us. We begin to accept ourselves and who we've been, and therefore we feel the acceptance reflecting back to us from the rest of reality. Okay, so we start to forgive ourselves and accept ourselves, and then we realize that we can pretty much say whatever we want, and even if people judge us, they're only judging themselves, because in this stage, we recognize that how we judge others is a reflection of how we judge ourselves. Now, some people say, this is crazy, this doesn't make sense. Think about the last child molester that you judged. Some newspaper article maybe, or a member of your family or a member of your community. Think about that child molester that you judged. Now think in one word how you would describe their behavior. How would you describe that behavior? Like, not using a word like fucked or evil or whatever, but like maybe even the word evil. Actually think of any word. Write down any word right now. Any word that you could use to describe their behavior. So I'll use some of the intense ones I just said you shouldn't use, but I'm going to use them anyway. So let's say the word evil, okay? Maybe that's the word that came up for you. Or like I said, fucked, it's really fucked. How could they do that to somebody? Or, sadistic or sick, okay? This is the hard part of this work right here. Now what I want you to do is whatever words you wrote down, I want you to take a few deep breaths. Take a couple of deep breaths, let go of your tension, your attachment to anything that you want to get out of what I'm about to say. And I want you to think of 5 times that you acted evil in your life that you haven't forgiven yourself for yet, or even that's just pop out to you in your mind. Anytime you act fucked, anytime you ever acted sadistic, anytime you ever acted sick in your life. Because if you judge somebody, it's what you're really judging is a part of yourself you haven't healed yet and forgiven yet. Now, I'm not saying that you've done anything like a child molester, or maybe you have, and that's no judgment. Believe me, I understand this stuff. I know how it gets passed on. I know how we create these mistakes in our lives. It's our behavior behavior taking us over. I don't have any contempt or judgment toward anyone in the world. And when I do, I recognize that I'm always judging an aspect of myself. Now, maybe it's not at the same level. Maybe you think I could never do something like that to somebody. It's true. But you have done things to people that you wish you've never done. And those things that you've done to other people are reflecting back in other people doing things that you would never do because you wished you'd never done the things that you did do. I hope that makes sense. It's a little complicated. But again, this part is deep. It's real deep. This is when we're getting into the emotional waters. We're getting into the deep waters of our truth, of what we are. We're getting into the depths of our pain. And this is where the demons live. This is where the scary ghosts and ghouls live. This is where all of the past that we don't want to ever imagine again lives. This is where our traumas live. This is where our pain lives, where our fears are really rooted in. It's all here. In this stage, we discover and rediscover our talents and passions. As we start to heal, our talents and passions begin to surface again. I told you all earlier about how when I started this work and I did some retreats, I started being able to write lyrics to music again. I started being able to write music. I started being able to write poetry all of a sudden, things that I never felt confident doing before. We start to let go of victimhood and find power in our past. We start to recognize that our past is actually the source of all of our power. It's the source of our confidence. It's the source of our wisdom. It's the source of our compassion. It's the source of everything that we love about ourselves as much as what we don't love about ourselves. And it helps us recognize how valuable our past really is. We start to have a new sense of self-love, true self-love. Not self-love, the word, but self-love, the verb. So we start to behave like we love ourselves. As people say, I don't love myself. How am I supposed to love myself? Well, what would you do if you did love yourself? How would you behave if you did love yourself? What would you do today if you did love yourself? How would you act in the world if you did love yourself? Because the answer to that question is how you love yourself. The answer to that question is how you start to develop a deep sense of self-love that expands into the feeling of self-love. I heard a quote once that said, love, the feeling, is the result of love, the verb. In other words, the experience of love is a result of the action of love. So we experience love after we've acted like what we consider to resonate with love. So when we treat ourselves with love, when we take ourselves out on a date, when we get a haircut or shave if you shave, or work out or drink lots of water or eat healthy food, we're loving ourselves. We're loving ourselves. We're loving ourselves in those times. And eventually, the continual behavior of love will create the experience of love. Our purpose starts to come clear. This is a big one. In the story, in the shamanic warrior story, Aniel in the pilgrimage, he learns to invoke this divine compassion in himself. He learns to have compassion for himself, have compassion for his truth, have compassion for his shortcomings and for his talents. He learns how to express himself and not always judge himself all the time, because he's able to invoke this energy of Archangel Gabriel, this energy of the medicine healer, of divine compassion, and he's able to have compassion for himself and others. And he even starts to use compassion as a sort of energy healing, Reiki healing energy, where he's able to actually pass it to other people without even touching them. He becomes so powerful at compassion. This is something we can do with other people. Our true purpose starts to come clear and emerge, and we start to recognize what we're really here to do and how fun it can really be. I knew that my purpose was to explain this kind of work for a long time, but I was terrified. Oh my God, how long is it going to take? How much work is it going to be? This is going to be so challenging. But then all of a sudden I started to realize that it will only be my purpose if it's also fun and playful. So the reason it didn't feel fun and playful is because I was attached to it looking a certain way. When I let go of that attachment, I began to flow with the idea. Then I started to recognize, oh, this is supposed to be really fun. It's supposed to be like a rock star lifestyle. It's supposed to be a dream lifestyle. It doesn't have to be challenging necessarily in a way that I don't want it to be. It can be challenging in a good way. Our rock star self starts to shine through. Rock equals earth. Star equals heavens. So in other words, our Yeshua self, our higher self, our whatever you want to call it self, I like to call it our rock star self, starts to shine through. If you're not somebody who resonates with the idea of rock star, I personally believe that we all have a purpose that actually allows us to be a rock star. And you say, well, I don't want to be a rock star, I don't want all that attention, blah, 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 whatever. That's fine, I don't disagree with you. But think about it like this. I went to see that movie A Star Is Born lately. You might like it or you might not like it. It's fine. But there's a scene in the movie where Bradley Cooper's up on stage, and it's showing you the perspective of being the musician, not from the audience in, but from the musician out into the crowd. And so he's up there, and you can't really see the crowd, but there are thousands of people in the crowd. And they're all cheering, and they're all so happy for him to be there. Lady Gaga comes out, and she's so nervous. And I watched it in IMAX, and you can see how nervous she is walking across the stage. And I was like, oh, I could feel it in my stomach. It's making me emotional thinking about it right now. And here's Bradley Cooper on stage, and Lady Gaga's there with him, and they start playing music. And in that moment, I realized it. It's when you're so aligned with your purpose that you're able to share it with so many other people. And in that moment, he was sharing the love of his purpose while they were sharing the love of their gratitude of his purpose. And in that moment, it was the most intense exchange of love. And that's what's available to us. That experience of having the whole world love you. And I know the whole world wasn't there watching him, but I bet you it felt like the whole world in that experience. Having the whole world there love you for who you really are. Not who you pretend to be, not who you hold yourself back from becoming, but the true expression of your purpose. Maybe you discover a way to end plastic for life, or maybe you discover a way to create renewable energy beyond anything that's been done before. Maybe you discover a way to reinvent parenting in a way that nobody's thought about before. Doesn't matter. Whatever it is, you've got a purpose inside you that on the other side of that purpose is a level of love and acceptance beyond anything you can imagine. Beyond anything that we can ever possibly imagine. It's just such an astronomical sense of self-love, and that is on the other side of living our most authentic selves. In the story, Aniel learns to see himself in others, like the exercise I just showed you. He learned to recognize that every time he looks at somebody, he's not really, most of the time, even looking at them. He's just being triggered by his own reflection in them subconsciously. So he has to actually become present, let go of the judgments, and start to see the people for who they really are instead of his own reflections. And that is an art. Believe me, that is an art that takes time, because every time we get triggered, there's some kind of pain being triggered that hasn't been healed yet. So every time you get triggered, it's a good thing if you know how to heal yourself, because that means you can humbly apologize or whatever. If like me, you might say something or do something in the past that you regret, and not that far in the past. Believe me, it still happens sometimes. We've been through a lot of stuff. We have to have compassion for ourselves, and I have to have compassion for myself. I get triggered sometimes. I haven't done anything I regret in a really long time, but I get triggered sometimes. And that's good, because those triggers show us what needs to be healed. It shows us the next level of pain that needs to be processed. And that's part of the part of this journey. The real goal of the path, there's only one real goal of the path, and that's to learn to love yourself and accept yourself and forgive yourself now. It's to learn how to have compassion for yourself right now. Because when you learn the mechanics of your being, and you learn that your behavior is borrowed, and that all of the things that you don't love about yourself are not really you, that they're behaviors you took on, then it's easy to love yourself now. Because then every time you do something that you don't like, you can be like, I wonder where that behavior came from. I wonder why I'm acting that way. I wonder what I'm trying to save myself from. I wonder what I'm trying to protect myself from right now. And then you can figure it out, and you can heal yourself through that by going all the way back in the past, finding the event that it was associated with. Because again, there's a deeper way to understand this that I'll teach you in the next lesson. There's something even deeper than just our pain. It's even deeper than that. Our identities with our past are also important. Some of us want to be victims. Some of us want to come from a struggled life. I say I came from poverty and I experienced a lot of trauma, but I had a beautiful life. I have a beautiful father, a beautiful mother, a beautiful brother who, when I'm able to allow myself to see their true selves, not the reflections of me that trigger the shit out of me, but who they really are, then I could see their true beauty. And I could see how they are loving me in the way that they're able to love me and the way that they know how to love. And that's when we really start to reach a level of true self-acceptance, because we start accepting the reflections in our parents and our siblings and our relatives that are reflecting back to the parts of us that we don't love. And then we start to accept ourselves a little bit more. Aniel learns that all judgment is a form of self-judgment. All judgment is a form of self-judgment. There's no limit to this. If you say, I'm not judging them, or I'm not judging myself, I'm judging them for this. No judgment isn't self-judgment. All judgment is self-judgment. All of it is, in some form or another. As we surrender our self-judgment, we become free of the judgment of others as well, because we recognize that when someone judges us, they're really just judging themselves, so it doesn't really hurt us anymore. We have compassion for them because we recognize, wow, it sucks. That person's still suffering from that self-judgment. They don't realize that they're just judging themselves. They have no idea. The key to excelling in this stage is everyone's favorite words, honesty. And I don't mean like not telling lies. That's important too. But I mean being honest with yourself about who you are, what you think, what you believe, how you see yourself in the world. Authenticity, again, being real, not people-pleasing or talking about the weather because you're too scared to talk about something vulnerable. Take yourself a little bit deeper. And then finally, the dirtiest word there is, transparency. This is scary. This is vulnerable stuff right here. In ancient times, for hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived in small tribes. And in these small tribes, our tribes protected us from other tribal members, from other predators, other people that might hurt us, or animals that might hurt us. They protected us from the elements, from the rain, from the snow, from freezing weather. They protected us from loneliness or being stuck, just dying through exposure, and so many other ways. Tribes protected us and fed us and housed us. So if we were honest, authentic, and transparent all the time, we might get kicked out of the tribe. Nobody would love us anymore. They kick us out. We get exiled. We get rejected. And then we die somehow. So we associated the fear of rejection with the fear of death. They were the same thing. Well, our tribe's not 30 people anymore. Our tribe's 7 billion people, for the most part. We can go anywhere in the world and meet people who we will resonate with at some point. We don't have to fear that rejection anymore, at least not as much as we used to. And it doesn't hurt anymore, at least not as much as it used to. So the key is really accessing a level of honesty, authenticity, and transparency that results in sort of a constant state, a willing state of vulnerability. Because vulnerability is the energy of transformation. Vulnerability is the energy of change. We can't change anything in our lives if we're not willing to feel vulnerable, because vulnerability is the result of exploring our edge. Vulnerability is kind of the result of facing our fears and doing something different. In ancient times, really ancient times, or in the darker times, I should say, when we were at lower consciousness, going out to the edge of the forest could be dangerous. We don't know what's there. We want to be able to see our tribe on the other side here, so we wouldn't really venture too far. We'd take somebody with us, or we'd take a spear or something. We don't live in that world anymore. We can venture a lot further than we realize. We can be vulnerable in a lot more situations without being in a serious threat or in serious danger. In the Shamanic Warrior, Aniel learns that pain creates our current suffering. Pain from the past is creating our current suffering. We could call it karma if you like. We could call it cause and effect. We could cause it just what you reap, you will sow, or what you sow, you will reap, whatever. But either way, the past pain that creates beliefs that we're not loved, or beliefs that we don't deserve love, or that we're not good enough, or that our parents don't love us, listen, I want to be very clear about this. I can't count how many times someone said to me, I had an amazing life, my parents are amazing, I know they love me, I have no question that they love me. Okay, so let's say you had 100 events happen in your life. Okay, let's say there are 100 interactions between you and your mother, for example. There were way more than 100, but let's say there were 100. Let's say 99 of those interactions were very loving, very nurturing, very compassionate, very whatever. Let's say one of those experiences created a belief that you're not good enough, that you don't deserve love, that your mom doesn't love you, or that she shouldn't love you, or whatever. Let's say you stole some change from her purse when you were a kid. She doesn't know about it. That's making you believe you're a thief and a liar and that your mother doesn't love you. Even if it's just that one thing. Even if it's just that one thing, there's a tiny amount of energy inside you that's convincing you that you're a thief maybe, or you're a liar, or whatever it might be. If you haven't confessed it, if you haven't processed it, it's still there. Now, if you told your mom, you guys laughed about it, or you two laughed about it, or whatever, maybe it's gone, maybe it didn't happen. But if there's anything hidden in there, if there's anything hidden in your life that hasn't been processed, then you are experiencing this problem. In some way or another in your life, you're experiencing unnecessary suffering. Because past pain equals current and future suffering if we don't heal it. It's like a cycle that goes around and around and around and around and around and around and around until we break the cycle, we stop the pain, and we change. We transform or transmute our lead into gold, as the alchemist said. Transmute our lead or our past pain into gold or future or current happiness and fulfillment and bliss, because when we heal the one thing that your mother did that caused you pain, or that you did that caused you pain, when we heal that thing, tension is released from the body, tension is released from the mind, tension is released from the emotional body, tension is released from the spiritual body, and then gifts and abundance and relationships and opportunities start to pour into our life that one thing was holding us back from having. Sounds hokey, I get it. You don't have to believe it, but it works. And even if it's not true, if you believe that it works, it will still work. That's why these esoteric systems are so powerful. Nothing is real except for the mind, and the mind isn't even real based on how we understand what real means. But if you believe it's real, or if you're able to comprehend it in some way, it can become real for you, even if it's not real, so to speak. Anil learns that living inauthentically repels love. Here's a big one. Imagine this. So when you live authentically, let me give you an example. Someone says to you, hey, I really love that shirt you have on. That's the best shirt. You look amazing. It's the best you ever looked. This is a bad example. Let me think of a different one. I didn't have one written down for this. Just let's imagine you just live inauthentically. You people please in your relationships. Maybe somebody asks you to do something and you do it, but you don't really want to, or you pretend to be a certain type of person around your work friends. You pretend to be a certain type of person around your family, and you pretend to be a certain type of person around your intimate partner, maybe. And there's a golden thread of who you are that kind of continues throughout those relationships, but on the surface, you're pretty inauthentic. You're just kind of being who you need to be in those relationships. And this is very common. Well, you're not receiving the love you're getting from those relationships fully. If you're pretending to be someone you're not, the love you're getting is inauthentic love, and your subconscious mind, your inner child, knows that that love's not for you. You don't deserve that love. That love's for someone you're pretending to be. And by pretending to be someone you're not, you're being dishonest. You're not being authentic with yourself. You're not being honest, transparent, or vulnerable. And so it repels love. And so all of our efforts, and believe me, this is me for a long time, and probably still me in some ways, they're unconscious until we find them. So I don't know where they're at yet, but I know they're there. I catch myself seeking validation sometimes and people pleasing, and I have to go through the process of healing that. But the love that we receive in those states, we're not fully receiving it. So we always feel, we all know this word, we always feel needy. Because when you take a bucket that has holes in it, in other words, our inauthenticity or our guilt or our shame or whatever, then when you pour water in it, the water just pours out, right? We never really fully fill it up. And so when we have this unprocessed pain, when we have these inauthentic behavior traits, when we're people-pleasing, when we're seeking validation and so on, we experience a feeling of neediness. We never really feel happy. Maybe we eat a lot of junk food, was for me, eating a lot of sugar, eating a lot of fatty, salty foods. Maybe it's alcohol for you. Maybe it's a drug. Maybe it's smoking cigarettes. Maybe it's using cannabis excessively. Maybe it's watching television. Maybe it's gambling. Maybe it's sex. Maybe it's masturbation. Maybe it's pornography. I don't know. Could be many of these things, but addictions are related to a neediness, and a neediness is related to even as little as one thing that makes us feel like we don't deserve love, which then makes us seek validation in a different way. So let me give you another example. I told this example earlier, but I'll say it again. Let's imagine that the kid came home with the 85 on the math test, and mom and dad, the teacher said you did amazing, but then mom and dad said, why didn't you get 100? The kid thinks I have to overachieve in order to get love. So now the kid achieves all the time to get love because the kid doesn't believe that they deserve love normally. But let's add another wrinkle to the story. Let's imagine that when the kid was 7 years old, he or she was sick for the day, and when they were sick, they got mom and dad's love unconditionally. Mom and dad were soup and popsicles or whatever else it was. The video just cut out and went back in. So what I said here was the 7-year-old gets really sick someday, little boy gets really sick, mom and dad shower the 7-year-old with love. So when the 9-year-old came home with the math test that was an 85, mom and dad said, well, why didn't you get 100? That's not good enough. But when the child was 7, mom and dad showered the child with love when they were sick. So now what belief is created? When I'm sick, I get love. When I'm myself, I'm not good enough. And so the only time I'm ever going to get love is if I get sick or if I'm an overachiever. And what happens when we are an overachiever for too long? Well, we get sick. We get stressed, we get chronic illness, chronic disease, mental illness, mental disease, whatever. Some kind of illness happens, and then we wonder, well, I don't know why I'm creating this unexplained chronic illness. I had this happen to me. I went to doctors, went to psychologists, all these people that couldn't explain it. It was a mental disease. It was something that I created in my mind. And we all do this in some cases. So how do we heal it? Well, we have to go back to those memories. We have to go back to those experiences. We have to purge the pain that's related to those experiences out of the body somehow, out of the emotional body, out of the physical body, out of the mental body, out of the spiritual body. We have to reprogram the beliefs that were created at that time. I'm not good enough. I have to work hard to get love. I have to be sick to get love. We have to reprogram those beliefs. Most people don't even know they have those beliefs. They can't even find them without another person taking them there. I couldn't find them in myself until somebody showed me how to do it. Now that I know how to do it, I can do it on my own, and I can do it for other people, but there are still levels I can't get to on my own sometimes that I need somebody else to help me with. This stuff requires partnership, requires community. It's very powerful. Again, Anil learns that pain unexpressed becomes repressed and leaves us depressed. I'm going to write that down just to drill it in your head. Pain unexpressed. So in other words, when we get hurt and we don't say anything about it, it becomes repressed and leaves us depressed. Now, depression leads to a bunch of other problems. It can lead to chronic illness. It can lead to chronic disease. It can lead to autoimmune disease. It can lead to mental disease. It can lead to self-sabotage. It can lead to so many different problems. Pain unexpressed becomes repressed and leaves us depressed. We have to express our pain in order to be free of it. It's the only way. It's the only way. This is ancient. This is not new. Confession's been around forever. Shamanism has been around forever. Healing has been around forever. The stuff I'm sharing with you is ancient. I'm not saying that it's 10,000 years old. I don't know if it has an age. It could be timeless. It's written in the geometry of nature. It's written in the geometry of our bodies. It's written in the code of our DNA. And then finally, Anil learns that confession is a healing technique. It's a gift that we give ourselves. So, if you want to really start learning how to heal your emotional body, I would start working with some kind of powerful, experienced, and qualified shaman, somebody who's done the work on themselves. If you're around a shaman and you don't feel like you want to express to them, like you want to be honest with them, like you are safe around them, like they're here to help you, then don't work with them because they're not resonating with you. Go to the next shaman, find somebody else. If you find a shaman that's trying to tell you that you have to do this or you have to do that, be wary of that, because that's a trap sometimes. That's an ego trap sometimes. If the shaman leads you to find your own understanding inside of you, if the shaman leads you to find your own truth, leads you to connect to your own higher self, if the shaman spends more time listening than talking, then you probably have a good person to work with. And this isn't just shamans, but also coaches, also therapists. If your coach or your therapist or your shaman or anyone that you're working with this kind of stuff talks more than they listen, I'd be wary of that. Because this work is about being listened to. It's not about how much advice somebody gives you and tells you how to change your life. Even what I'm telling you here, I keep telling you, don't believe anything I'm saying. Figure this out on your own. It's the only way that you're going to be self-sufficient, is if you figure this out on your own. I know this particular lesson is longer than any of the rest, and that's on purpose, because this one is the biggest and most important. Talk therapy is really valuable. I mentioned it in the last video, but it's so valuable. Expressing ourselves to a therapist, even if the therapist doesn't say anything, we notice a feeling of lightness and we're able to see our mind more clearly. Even if they don't say anything at all, even if they just listen and don't even respond to you, you will experience miracles as a result of this. If you talk long enough to somebody, all of your stuff will come out and you'll start to organize this stuff on your own and start to heal it. Dance lessons. I know it sounds uncomfortable, dancing around, getting uncomfortable in front of other people. The idea of even telling this stuff on camera, to me, would have been terrifying a couple years ago. Dancing and singing in front of people or performing in front of people was scary for a lot of my life. Despite my history as an MMA fighter and things like that, it didn't matter. I was still nervous and still uncomfortable. Dance lessons, singing lessons help us express ourselves in a more feminine way. They help us connect with our water element and learn how to flow a little more in life. Learn how to chant. Chanting is really powerful too, especially if you're using ancient chants, using ancient words or ancient symbols or sentences or phrases that have meaning or have some kind of magic power behind them. Spending time in or around water like the ocean or lakes or things like this can help you balance your emotional body. Spending time near the ocean and just watching the waves back and forth, that can calm us down and start to calm our emotional waters and emotional body. This is probably one of the most fundamental parts of my healing. It's float therapy. I go to a place called the Flotation Center in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Floating is you're in a tank that has 1,000 pounds of Epsom salts with water, about this much water. So you're floating in the water. And the tank has a door. You can leave it open or leave it closed. I close it personally. And you just lay there and you release your body. Because the salt is so buoyant, you just float and you're really able to let go. And I spend about 60 to 75 minutes in there. Sometimes I use cannabis to go a little deeper in the ceremony. Sometimes I don't. I pretty much always say some kind of prayer or ritual in the tank. I bless the water. I turn it into holy water. And then I kind of bathe in that water and imagine myself transforming, kind of like a chrysalis, like a caterpillar would go through. And I set an intention for what I want to get of the experience. And I just let go and meditate. It's very powerful. Journaling, again, I said it in the last video, but it's vital. Journaling is so important to express ourselves and get things out there. Writing, painting, confession, again, these things are always important. The mantra in the Shamanic Warrior, one of the mantras is authenticity is a radical act of self-love. Authenticity, being who you really are, is the most radical, in my opinion, the most radical act of self-love, besides obviously nourishing ourselves and protecting ourselves and taking care of ourselves. Authenticity is a radical act of self-love. Authenticity is the only way that we are going to receive the full love that's available to us from the people around us and from ourselves. It's the only way that we can really access that true love. So this is the acceptance stage. This is the stage of becoming who you really are, accepting who you've been, accepting the parts of yourself you don't love because they aren't really who you are anyway. And in this stage, you're connecting to who you are, letting your true authentic self shine, letting your true authentic self express through your actions, through your words, and through your lifestyle, so you can start to love the real you instead of the you that you felt you had to pretend to be most of your life. So that's it. I'll see you in the next video.